Hello?
Hey everyone, this is Bayard at Quadient Technical Support. We'll be getting started here in just a couple minutes. If you're logged in, this is the Introduction to Bulk Mailer class, and I'll be stepping through all the various aspects of the program. If you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and post them into the chat window. So if you look for the GoToMeeting, menu there, you'll see down at the bottom, and there's a spot there where you can put in chat. So go ahead. Since we have so many people on the call here today, we're going to mostly keep the mics muted so that we don't have too many distractions. Like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and just put them into the chat for me. Thank you. Okay, it's a couple minutes past the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Bayard, and I work here in the technical support office for Quadient, previously Satori. We've been merged with another software company, and that's why the name changed from Satori to Quadient. But we're all basically the same people down here supporting the product. Same ones have been working on it and supporting it here for many years. If you can see my screen here, you should be able to see bulk mailer. Check the view. Yep. So to get started here, this is the bulk mailer home screen, and we'll just take a quick tour about the various features. After that, we're going to work our way through these steps here along the left and do a do kind of a sample mailing, and so you'll see how each one of those functions works there along the left. So in the home screen, we've got basically three elements here. We've got the steps that you would go through to actually create a mailing and process a mailing. Over on the right in this large screen is a list of mailing jobs that have been created and worked on in this particular instance of bulk mailer. And in the middle here is this folder section, and this is an option that you can use to organize your mailing files. Because if you're creating a new mailing, if you're a busy shop, maybe you're doing 5 or 10 a week or maybe more, they'll start to pile up in this home screen. And the idea of this folder option over here is that you can archive those mailings that you've done over into the folders. So to talk about a particular mailing job, we'll take a look at this one here. This job has 2009 records in it. I can see down here under the report area that it was address correction was run on the 21st of December. I can see a move update was run that same day. They found 11 people that moved. If I want to get to the specific report, I can recreate it. And I can see here in the mail sort that, that a mail sort was run. And if I click on the reprint reports, I can actually go back and regenerate that postage statement. Inside the mailing file itself are all of the records, and it will keep track of if addresses were changed by address correction, or if an address was changed during the move update processing. And again, you've got all of these mailing reports. So the mailing file itself is actually a very nice archive of everything that transpired for that particular job. And for that reason, you want to preserve it, you want to save it off to the side in case somebody comes back 3 months or 6 months from now and wants to know, did this particular piece get mailed, or what did we pay on that postage last time we did this job for you, that sort of thing. All of that gets nicely saved in the mailing files. So you can see I've created some folders here. These are just date ranges, but I've also seen a lot of clients, they'll create subfolders for their clients. So here I've got some jobs here for Acme, and I can highlight those two, and then you can see how I can just put them over here into the Acme folder. So if I ever need to get back to them, I can click on that folder and get to them. But in the meantime, it gets the rest of these jobs out of my main screen. So here we'll look at the date modified. Here's some older ones. Here's one from 2016. Oh, that's an Acme. We'll stick that in with Acme. And these are some older ones from 2018. So we'll go ahead and move them over into the 2018 folder, and I'll just keep these other ones here close by so we can kind of see how that works. A mailing file is going to have two states. It can either be opened or closed. If I double click on it, it's going to open that mailing file, and you'll notice how it's in bold. And what that indicates is that whatever steps I take along the left here are going to impact the addresses in that mailing file. So this one here, if I double click on that, it's going to ask me, do I want to close that first one? If I say yes, you'll see now that this is the one that's in bold. So again, any steps I take are going to act upon this mailing file. And the rule is only one mailing file open at a time. So to create a mailing file, here we'll go ahead and close this. To create a mailing file, we use the new mailing wizard. And you just double click on that, and you get the option to create a blank mailing. We'll go ahead and go with the default option here today. Bulk mailer will give you a file name composed of the date and the local time on the computer, but you can just type right over the top of that. And since we're in August here, we'll call this the August session. This will be file number 1. So we hit finish, and you must specify a new template name or delete the previous one. Okay, maybe I've got another one here. I'll call this one number 2 then. Okay, so there's my new mailing file. You'll notice I've got 0 records because at this point it's basically just a container that's going to hold all of the addresses as well as all the reports and update information that we generate when we process the mailing file. But as you can see, it's very quick to create a brand new mailing file. Just a couple of clicks and away you go. Next step is to import some addresses. So we'll come over here on the left, we'll drop down to where it says import export. And we'll use the import wizard to import some addresses. When it comes to importing addresses, a bulk mailer can import addresses from a number of different file types. So you can see here fixed length, text files, Excel, DBase, Access. So we have a number of different file types. You can even import from another bulk mailer file. So if somebody gives you a bulk mailer file and you want to just pull the addresses out of it, you can use this option. And I've got a couple of good files here that I like to use. So let's go ahead and pull in this CSV file. So we'll say open on that. So now we've done step number 1, which is to select the file. It's demo list-intro. We'll go next. This screen is showing us a picture of what's inside that file. So a CSV file is basically a text file CSV stands for comma separated values. And if you look in here, you can see that there's commas separating the various fields. So this is what we would see if we open that file with Notepad. It would basically look like this. So it's just kind of giving you an idea of what's in there. The next screen here, there's some operators. So it's got the comma is selected as the delimiter, meaning the character that separates the different fields. If this was set wrong, you would see it all kind of get squashed together. Commas are comma separated or comma delimiters are pretty common, so we use that. Sometimes you'll see a pipe, and then you can put the pipe character in here if you have it. And double quote has to do with what are called field framing characters or field separators. And it would be this file doesn't have the double quotes, but if it did, you would see a double quote around each one of these fields. And the nice thing about that option is that way, if one of the fields happens to have a comma in the middle of it, it will know not to break apart that record and put in another field because that comma is contained within the double quotes. Doesn't hurt to have this set on. If it doesn't find any, it's not going to hurt any. This one down here is a very important one. First row contains field names. Now, if we go back to previous, and if you look at that first row, you'll see it's not an address. So what that is a column header, or sometimes called a field name row. And we want to pull that up so that it's at the top of this column. If this was unchecked, let's say we had a file that did not have column headers, then we would have to go with these kind of generic column names. And then when we get to the next step of mapping, it makes it a little bit more difficult because you don't have a description of what's in there. But this particular file has column headers, so we'll go ahead and check that box. So the first row contains field names. We're checking that box, and you see how it moves that first row up into that column header position. All right, next screen. This is where we do our field mapping, and sometimes called linking. And that's actually what these little chain links indicate here. So this column here, this is these are the fields that are found in the input file. So that's called the source. Here are the fields that are built into the bulk mailer file. So when we created that bulk mailer file on the first step, we created that bulk mailer mailing file. It basically creates a giant Excel spreadsheet with all of these columns. And the name of the game here is just to match up the source data field to the appropriate bulk mailer field. Now, as you can see these chain links here, what's happened is that bulk mailer has automatically mapped these first through fields because it knows to look for some general input fields like first name or F name or first space name. It'll automatically map it to its own input field just to save you the trouble. But as you can see on these down here, it didn't jump to, it didn't make the assumption. It's going to wait for the human to come along and do the manual mapping so that it can be done correctly. By the way, this one over here, this column, this is also the source column, but on this column, it's only showing the ones that are mapped. So you can see first name, last name, and business, but none of the other fields are mapped. The other thing you'll notice here is that if you hover over the field name, it gives you kind of a picture of what's in that column. So you can see here that at the top of the column, there's April, Luke, and Troy. If we back up, you'll see that's coming from here, April, Luke, and Troy. So that's just showing you basically a picture of what's inside each one of these columns so that when you hover over them, you can you get a visual cue on what type of data is in there. That's particularly helpful if you don't have column headers. So if we were just looking at column 1, column 2, column 3, we would definitely have to hover over the column and see what's in there before we did our linking. Okay, so again, bulk mailer has automatically mapped these first 3, and we're going to go ahead and map the rest of these. So here's the mailing address, and if we hover over that, we can see it definitely looks like address data. So we will link that up to address line 1. We click the map button, and now we've got a chain link there. So that one is now linked, and when we run the import process, it'll pull that data into address line 1. We don't have an address line 2 field. Instead, we've got city. So we'll go ahead and map that one up, and then we've got state, and we got zip code. All right, so, and then you can look over here again just to make sure that everything looks like it's mapped properly. We've got this one last column here. This is an example of what we call user data. So it's not a name field, it's not a address or a postal field. It's a field that could be something like a contact ID or a promotional code, or it could be like a VIN number, or some other kind of identifier code. It's not uncommon that the list owner will have these additional bits of information that they want to have retained with that address record. So when it comes back and it's time to print, they've got not only the new address and they know what tray that record goes in, but they've still got their contact ID that they can use to join it back into their system. Or maybe they want to print it right onto the mail piece. So if they're doing a marketing campaign, the marketer calls and they look and asks the recipient, okay, if you look on your letter, you'll see there's a code there. Tell me what that code is, and I can use that to look something up in my system. So it's a again, it's like a user data, and to make use of that, we've got the user text fields down here. So we go ahead and just map that, and it will tie user text 1 now to this data in this column. So in some cases, there may be many of these user text fields, and we've got built-in, we've got here 5 on the initial display, but notice how if we check this box that says show all fields, it's going to bring up, here in Bulkmailer Professional, we get all the way up to 15 user text fields, plus we've got a couple of user number fields, a note field that you can use for larger text. If you're doing periodicals, you can also tie in things like your subscription, dates, sample copy, indicators, things like that. The other thing that we get with the show all fields, an important one, is this full name field. You'll notice our input file has just two fields, first name and last name. But what if what if these first and last names were all contained within just a single field? That's pretty common. So you'll get the address and it'll have the name, a column for the name, but it's the first and last name and maybe the name suffix. It'll all be joined together into just a single field. If that's the case, then you're going to have to check this box here that says show all fields and then link it to the full name field. So the full name field is kind of a special field, and it's intended for kind of parsing out the first and last name. It'll also retain a copy of what you put in there as well. The middle name, the title, the name suffix, these again are additional fields that get exposed if you check this show all fields box. If you don't need it, you leave it unchecked. It just makes things, fewer options to pick through. Okay, we've got everything mapped. All of these input fields are now mapped. Be aware that you don't have to map every field that's on your input file. If there's 50 fields on the input file and all you really need is just the name and the address, because all you're going to do is just do the labels, the addressing labels, then just map up the names and the addresses, the address related fields, and the rest of them you can just leave unchecked or unlinked. All right, we'll go ahead and do next. And on this screen here, this is the summary screen. So we've got this box checked, import file based on the settings. What do they mean by settings? Basically, they mean all of these settings. And then we have this option to save the settings as a new template. So we're going to go ahead and do that because it comes in handy, and you'll see here in a few minutes how that works. So we'll call this the August session template. And we say finish. And there we go. We brought in 2009 records. If we bounce back to the home screen, we'll see that our file now shows 2009 records. And if we move forward here, there's the importing step. If we move forward to the views and open up the basic address view, we'll see these are the addresses now inside of Bulkmailer. So there's April, Luke, and Troy right there at the top of the list. And you can see addresses, city, state, zip. The thing you want to do here, and one of the reasons why we have the view right after import export is after you've done your importing, you want to make sure you come here and take a look at the at where things landed, just to make sure that everything came in as you expected it to. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about views since we're on the views screen. If anybody has questions about importing, go ahead and post them into that chat window. And we're going to kind of step back and take another look because I saved that import template. So we're going to take a look at that. But first, we're going to talk about views a little bit. So the idea of the view is it lets you see the data. And I'm going to show you the entire bulk mailer file itself. I'm going to open up this one here called the full record view. So this is going to show us all of the fields inside of that mailing file that we created on the first step. So on this first step, when we did the new mailing wizard and we created this mailing file .bmf for bulk mailer filed, basically it created a giant Excel spreadsheet that has all of these fields in it. Now, we don't have to use all the fields. So you can see there's April, Luke, and Troy up there. But we'll use the fields that we need. When we go to do address correction, it's going to populate some of the fields. When we do mail sorting, it'll populate some of these fields. When we do NCOA move update checking, it'll populate some of these fields. And so some of them get used, some of them don't, but they're all there in case you need them. So here's the full record view. And the trouble is with the full record view is that you have to wade through all of these fields to find what you're looking for. So for example, you remember I brought in that user text data. So here's my name fields. And suppose I want to see what that promotional code is on the same screen where I'm looking at the names. So in order to do that, I would have to scroll way over here to the user text field, but now I can't see the name. So the full record view is useful in that it has every field in there. So if you really want to just look at something quickly, a one-off situation, then you can open the full record and scroll back and forth and find it. But we provide these other views because the idea is that you want to just see the fields of interest for a given task. So for example, if I wanted to just look at my move update results, I would open up this move update view. And here's the name fields right next to all these fields that get populated by move update. Now we haven't run move update yet, so they're blank, but you get the idea that you've got the fields of interest for move update are right here next to the name fields. The name fields or the views can be modified. So let me show you how you can do that. Here's the basic address view. I'm going to right click on that and choose open. And then I click next. And here's all the fields that are currently in the basic address view. And then over here, you notice the show all fields button. Here's all the fields that could be added to it. So the ones that are already in there are grayed out. So we've already got country, it's already over there. And zip code is already over there. The ones that are not in that view are not grayed out. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in this user text field because I want to see that code right next to the first name. So I'll go next and finish. And so now here's that first name, last name, and here's the user text that I brought in, and it's all together where I can see it all in one screen. So again, the point is when you're working with views, you want to get the columns of interest on the view that you're using. And if it's something that you use on a regular basis, then you're going to want to go ahead and just create your own view. So here, the list view wizard, if you double click on this, you click next, you start out with a blank slate, and you can add whatever fields you want in there to get that view. So it's showing you just the columns that you want to look at without having other columns in your way. So that's a nice thing about having multiple views. If you want to modify them again, what we do is we highlight it, and then you choose right click and choose open. So here I've got that user text field. I'm done with it. I think I'll unselect it, get it back out of the view. And now I'm back to the original view that I just had. One quick comment on that full name field. You remember I said it's kind of a special field. So I'm going to open up this is the full record view, and we're going to go look at that. So as you recall, we brought in separate first and last name fields, right? But somehow here the full name field is already populated. And the way that happened is that this full name field actually is created out of these separate name element fields. And there's even a way to specify which fields you want to include in your full name field. So if we go up here to Tools, Options, and go to Preferences, here's the full name definition. And so it's basically stitching together the salutation field, the first, middle, and last, plus the suffix. If you want to reduce the number of fields that are going into it, you can select any one of these options. But here's how it works. Let's say I need to edit. So Troy, I want to add like a middle initial for Troy. So I'm going to put in a D in the middle name field. and you'll see how it automatically adds to the full name field. So again, the full name field is kind of a virtual field. It's just going to be stitched together out of these name elements. If I need to edit something in here, it kind of looks like you could, but you can't change anything in the full name field. In order to edit it, you have to go to the separate element. So if I want to get rid of that D, click yes on that, and you can see how it's dropped it out now. So the full name field is kind of a special field. When you use it to import, remember I mentioned some input files will come with a full, with just a single column where it's the first and last name, maybe the name suffix, junior, and things like that, all just crammed together into a single field. It will populate into the full name field if you choose that during your importing process. And then Bulkmailer is going to try to parse it out into the first and last name fields as best it can. But you'll always still have your original full name field version that you brought in this field. So it's handy if you're doing a mail merge and you want to say Dear April at the top of your letter rather than Dear April Portillo. So you've got an option here to parse it out. Even if you bring it in as full name, again, Bulkmailer will try to parse it out into separate name fields. So that's the full name field, kind of a special one. The other one that sort of works that same way is the city state zip. And so you can see here's a city state zip all combined together. These are handy, these two fields, the full name field and the city state zip field, they come in handy when you're placing your address elements on your address label, because then you don't have to worry about, trying to piece together 3 separate fields and get the spacing just right on your layout. So you can just grab the city state zip and the full name field, and you'll know that you'll have everything you need just in one simple field. Okay, some other things we can do in views. Let's go back to the basic address view. So in working in views, you noticed that you can make edits. You can just double click right in there. If you see you've got say we've got some addresses where you can delete the record or delete the field just by hitting the delete button. If you want to just delete the entire address, you can highlight it, or you can drag down, highlight a group of addresses, and use this little check mark. And you use that, and that will delete those records. If you want to delete them all, you can hit this double X, and boom, they're gone. But they're not really gone all the way, because you can go up here to where it says File, Manage Deleted Records, and you can see we've got 2009 records marked as deleted, and we get the option to either purge or recover them. So if we choose recover, they all come back in. And if we delete them all and choose purge, then they're gone. They're gone for good. So if we go back up to manage deleted records, you'll see it's all grayed out. There's no way to purge them. I'm not too worried about it because I saved that template. So if I go back and look at that template that I saved here, the August session template, if I double click on this, I can go straight to finish and bring them right back in. So you can see the value of saving a template, an import template. If you have a job that's a recurring job where the list owner provides you a list with the same column ordering, so it's always first name, last name, business, city, state, zip, etc. If they provide that to you on a regular basis, then you're going to want to, when you set up your initial import template, you're going to want to check that box that I checked that says save the template or save the settings as a template, and give it a name that indicates that file type. And then the next time you need to import it, you still have to create your bulk mailer file, but the next time you need to import it, you can import it with just by running that template. Let's say the template or the input file is the same, but it's located in a different folder. So let's open this one up, right click, choose open, and we can step through it. Notice we can go straight to finish. But if we do next, we could go here and select, let's say it's no longer in this file, in this folder, it's somewhere else, but it's still the same format. Then you would just go here and choose the select button and browse to where the file is, and then choose next. Notice you can go finish at any point along here. If you want to just eyeball the settings, make sure they're still good, everything's the way we like it, you can step through it again if you want and just do next, next, next. Here's that checkbox, save settings, and do finish, and then run the import. Now, I don't know if you noticed here, but I ran that import twice now. I did the delete, purged all the records, so I was back down to 0 records. And then I ran the template once just by hitting finish, and the second time by stepping through it and then running it again. So you'll notice now if I go back to the home screen, I've got 4,000 records. So this is an important thing to note about the importing step, is that Bulk Mailer is happy to import records anytime you bring them in, but it's not going to automatically remove any records that are already in that Bulk Mailer file. And that's by design, because it's not uncommon to have a job where you have to combine 2 or 3 input files together into a single job, and you may need to run dedupe, to get out any duplicates. But this way you can combine addresses that are in an Excel file, addresses coming to you from a text file. You combine them all together into one Bulk Mailer file, and then you've compiled a group of addresses from separate input files. But in my case here, I really don't want to have all those duplicates, so I'm just going to go back to views, delete them, and manage deleted records, and I'm just going to purge those again. And this time I'll just run that August template just one time, and there we go. Now we're back to our original 2009 records. And if we did everything right, we've got April, Luke, and Troy at the top, and we've got city, state, zip. Everything's populated just like we like. So that is some of the things you can do in views, deleting and recovering. Let's take a look at some of the other things. Of course, it's kind of like Excel. If you need to alphabetize things, you can click on these here and put everything in alphabetical order. You can do find and replace. So if you just want to find something, that's fine. If you want to replace it with something else, you could put that down there and it'll go through and do that for you. Another big feature in here is you can do some filtering. So for example, if I come down to this this field here, it has Chicago in it. If I right click and choose filter for records containing Chicago, it's going to basically exclude anything that doesn't match my filter. So I say, I want city to match Chicago. You'll notice now, if you look at these addresses, they're only the addresses that are in Chicago. So the first question comes up is, well, what happened to the other ones? The other addresses where the city didn't equal Chicago, they did not get deleted. And that's where this data details box comes in handy for you. So there's 156 records where the city equals Chicago. And if I go to the last record here, my record navigator, you can see here Elizabeth Cooper in Chicago. She's the last one, 156. The total count is still 2009, but what's happened is that any records where it did not match my my filter, they're put into what's called an inactive state. So these are what we call the active records, and any record that doesn't match the filter gets put into an inactive record, inactive state. And the upshot of that is that any of the steps that I take along here, so it could be exporting, address correction, mail sorting, it will only act upon these records that are in the active condition. So that's a really powerful tool. It's a way to very quickly grab a subset of your records and then apply some kind of edit to it, or maybe to export that batch of records. And speaking of edits, there's one more tool up here I want to introduce. This one here is called the Mass Edit Records tool. So now that I've got these selected down to just the Chicago records, I'm going to change the contents of a field and the user text. And this is left over from last time here, current Chicago resident, it says. So I'm going to be putting this value into that user text field. It will only impact the records that are currently in this active condition, so this current count. Here it's showing me right now user text is blank. After it runs this process, it's going to say current Chicago resident, and we'll go ahead and do finish. And now we've got 156 records that we've updated. Again, the point I'm making here is that it only impacts the records that are in this current count, or the ones that are currently active. And then we'll get to the next question, which is how do I get the rest of my addresses to be active? Let's say I want to get back to all my addresses so that they're all active. There's 3 different methods. And if you're in the view screen, the easiest one is just to simply right click and choose display all active records. So that that not only puts the addresses, brings all addresses back to the active condition. So you can see our current count is now 2009. It also puts them back in the original order. So even if I was to, let's say I sorted this A to Z, so now it's no longer in the original order that I imported it in. If I was to right click and just choose display all active records, that will put them back into the same order. I mentioned there's two other methods. One is to simply close the mailing file and reopen it. And when you do that, it'll open in the all active records. And the third method is to use, we have a group, and we'll get to groups here in a bit. There's a group in there that you double click on and it'll do the same thing. It'll put them, all records to be active. Okay, so let's take a look at the results of that mass edit that I did. And we'll open up the full record view. So again, I did this edit using the mass edit records tool, changed the contents of a field. I went through and changed user text 2 to be this value here. But when I ran that process, I only had 156 records currently active, all the records that were in the city of Chicago. So if we scroll over here, we should see that when we get to user text 2, okay, so you can see they're blank until we get to the records that are in Chicago, and then everything else is blank. So it looks like all those records are grouped together. So you can see the power of that mass edit record, the combination of filtering and using that mass edit records tool allows you to grab a batch of records and do some kind of update process on them without impacting the other records. Last thing about this filtering, and again, right click, you can either filter for blanks, exclude records, filter records containing. This kind of filtering, we're going to call this sort of ad hoc filtering that you can do in views. When we get to groups, you'll see how you're able to specify even more specifically groups of records. So you can have multiple options. So not just Chicago, but where the last name starts with A, for example, or not just Chicago, but where the carrier route is, R202 or something. So you can actually have multiple criteria to apply to your select statement, and then select the records or filter the records based on multiple criteria. But if you're in the view screen, it's very quickly and easily done. You can just right click and choose to filter right on the fly. All right, and any questions on views? We're going to come back to views after we've populated some of these fields with our address quality steps. But for right now, we'll go ahead and say goodbye and move on. So we've got the address quality. So we've brought in the addresses, we've eyeballed them in the views to make sure that that they look like they came in properly and the fields are matching what we expect. So the next step are these address quality steps. And the two we're going to talk about today are address correction and move update. The address correction process, basically what it does is it takes the address that we brought in and then it compares it to the USPS data records and it tries to find a match. If it finds a high confidence match, it says, okay, this is definitely the same address, then it's going to bring back from that USPS data record things like the carrier route, the delivery point, the LOT, there's just a whole bunch of extra postal data that we can bring back from that USPS record. So again, we have an input record, we go and we see if it matches an existing record, and we have some fuzzy logic matching so that if it's misspelled slightly or if it's missing the directional, that would be like the north or the south, and we can figure out that it's very likely this is the address that they're wanting to use, then we can do some address correction processing to correct the input address. But again, the main purpose is to bring back that U.S. postal data so that we can build the intelligent mail barcode or do some carrier route grouping for carrier route mailings. So that's address correction. It doesn't look up the person in Google and try to find out where they live now or anything like that. It's just basically matching the input address. There's one exception in that if you have a business name in there, it will use this additional process called SuiteLink, where it'll look up that business and it'll validate the suite number. So not every business is part of that program, but if the business happens to be listed in the SuiteLink database and the suite number is either missing or incorrect, the suite link process will correct that suite number. Okay, in contrast, we'll look at move update. Move update, again, using a USPS data set, we take the address, but this time, not only the address we're matching on, we're also matching on the first name, first and last name for an individual move, or a last name for a family move, or a business name for a business move. We're matching on the address and one of those name fields. And if we find a match in the NCOA database and we see that that person has submitted a change of address form, then we bring back that new address into bulk mailer, and we update the address in bulk mailer so that you've got the new address. So that's NCOA link or move update processing. Again, we're not going out on whitepages.com. We're not going out looking for it. We're comparing it to a USPS, a database full of records where people have submitted their change of address. So if the person did not submit a change of address, we're not going to find it. Those records, by the way, is sometimes referred to as COAs, change of address. And so that's why the N for national change of address, NCOA link. All right, so let's kick off address correction. We've got the address correction wizard, and there's going to be a few settings here. Generally, you can just go with the defaults, but we'll take a quick look at a few of these. This first one, incremental processing. We're going to set it for all records. The other option would be if to only check addresses that haven't already been checked. So that would be in a case where you have a mailing file where maybe you've got 100,000 records in it, and you've just added 10 more records, and you don't want to do the entire address correction process for all 110,000 records. You could just do only the records that haven't been already checked, but generally you're going to leave this one on all records. This one here, dual address preference. This refers to a rare condition. Sometimes you'll see addresses where address line 1 is the street address, so where the mailbox is. Address line 2 is a PO box. So these are addresses that have both a PO box and a street address. If I give you a letter to deliver, you hop in your car, you're on your way there, you look down there and you go, hey, wait a minute, I can't put this in a PO box and in the mailbox at the same time. I only have one letter. So how do I know which one you want me to put it in? So that's why it's called a preference here. So if you are processing an address list and it happens to have one of these where it has both a street address and a PO box, the processor will look at this and figure out which one you prefer, and the barcode and the zip+4 will be associated with whichever one you choose here. So again, the PO box, the zip+4 for the PO box is going to be different than the zip+4 for the street address. The barcodes are going to be different, so we have to tell the program which one is the true delivery address. This one here, this says position bottom. What that means is whichever address happens to be an address line 2 is the one that should be preferred as the delivery address. Again, these are very rare. You don't see these too often, but they do happen where people have got both PO box and street address. Here's an option. This is probably the preferred way to go. Internet processing. This can save you time when you're updating bulk mailer. If you use internet processing, you don't have to download these large address correction files, which can really slow down the updating process. You know, in order to meet the requirements of the Postal Service, when you go to check addresses, you have to be using a relatively new batch of address correction files. They can't be older than 2 months. Which means that if you are downloading those address correction files and installing them locally to your computer, it's going to be 20 minutes to a half hour to an hour, or maybe longer every time you do your update. If you just use internet-based service, then you never have to download those, and you can keep bulk mailer updated. Just take 10 minutes once a month to do the update. All right, let's go ahead and do next. Here's some, this is DPV, stands for Delivery Point Matching Options. And we've actually added a new checkbox in here that's new to this version of bulk mailer. This one here, require DPV, keep original address when DPV is not confirmed. So basically what it says is, even if we think that we might be able to improve the address, but it's still not validating all the way to the delivery point, then roll it back to the original address. So this basically tells the program, if you can't get it to be 100% delivery point validation, then just put it back the way it was. So that's actually a pretty good option. This one here, required delivery point validation unit confirmation. What they're talking about here is the apartment or the suite number. And these are kind of in-betweeners. By that I mean, we've got delivery point validation to the building, but we don't have a valid apartment or a suite number. For some mailers, for some list owners, that's good enough. You know, if they're mailing a promotional piece and it's just kind of generic message they're sending to everybody, maybe it's 10% off on the next pizza coupon or something like that. That's good enough. If I can get it to the building and it ends up in the dumpster or ends up in somebody else's mailbox, that's okay with me. I'm not worried about it. It's not private information. So in that case, not going to check this box. But if you're mailing something that's private in nature, so that's financial or medical, school grade reports, anything that's going first class mail because it has to be specific to that individual, then you're going to want to check this box. And what this is telling the program is that even though you've got delivery point validation to the building, and that means that it can be in what's called an automation compatible address, so you could get those automation rates, the cheaper automation rates, I still want it to be considered a not confirmed because I don't want to take any chances that this medical report or this grade report or this financial report falls into the wrong hands. So again, you'll have to review that with the list owner to figure out, which way they're going to go. And again, the issue is specifically just addresses that have got delivery point validation to the building, but they don't have delivery point validation to what's called the secondary or the unit, which would be the suite number or the apartment number. Moving on here, we've got additional data. This one here, this lookup line of travel, you need this if you're doing any kind of carrier route basic sorts. These other two are add-on features, so you can add longitude and latitude, or you can add this extra indicator. It's called residential address, or RDI, residential indicator. But those are add-on features that you have to have an extra registration key for. Here is where we specify the formatting, so whether it's uppercase or lowercase, whether we want abbreviations or not, this would be all checked right here. The one recommendation we make is when it comes to casing, if you're doing mixed case, you probably don't want to apply that to business names, because then if you have a business like AAA Plumbing, it's going to come out with capital A followed by 2 lowercase a's, and so there's no way for the program to know acronyms in the way the acronyms should be formatted. And then the same thing with the name fields. If your list owner is using mixed case and they've got their names set up the way they like them, then just lay off the names and just let them go through the way they come in. So you uncheck that box. We're still going to apply mixed case to the street names and the city names and that sort of thing, but we're just not going to touch business or the name fields. All right, next, this screen here where you enter your organization's information to show on the postal form that your organization is the one that did the address correction processing, or sometimes called the CAS processing. And we'll go ahead and run this job here. So it's contacting our server, it's sending the addresses up and getting them back. Runs pretty quick. If you've got really large files, I think it can do about, depending on your connection speed, 300 to 500,000 in an hour is pretty typical. Maybe a little faster. Okay, when the processing is done, you want to take a look at this one here, and this address here, or this list here. This is unusual. 34% of them failed address correction. You know why that is? That's because I checked that box for the unit information, where I said if I want the unit, if the unit couldn't be validated, then I want to consider it to be an uncorrected record. And that's why it's showing up here, 34% errors. I'm going to rerun this again. I don't normally do that, so let me go ahead and rerun this again. But it's actually a pretty good demonstration of how powerful that is. It's this one here, require DPV unit confirmation. So I'm going to uncheck that, and then we'll go ahead and run it this time. We'll compare that. So last time we got 34% failed delivery point validation when we said the delivery point validation required both the primary or the street to the building as well as the secondary, meaning the unit or the apartment number. So now I'm running it, and look at this. Now I'm only getting 3, maybe I'll get 3% errors. So you can see what a huge difference that made in the percentage of errors. And what that tells me is that this list has a lot of addresses that are either have bad secondaries or missing secondaries. So again, the secondary is the unit or the apartment number. The primary is the street address. So it's 123 Main Street. 123 is the primary number. And if the apartment 3G, that's going to be the secondary number. Okay. So we'll go ahead and close. Yep, we'll go ahead and close that. That's address correction. Now let's go ahead and run move update. Move update, again, we're going to take these addresses and see if they match any submissions to the National Change of Address database. We've got a couple of settings here, including a password, which I'm going to have to look up. Just a moment. Okay, so move update also runs against the server, and so it runs over the internet. We've got a couple options here. These days, you're going to want to check all moves, because if you're doing full service, they will fine you, or they'll ding you if you miss too many moves. Meaning, if the addresses you have a posted move in that National Change of Address database, and you fail to update your address accordingly, if you get above a certain threshold, you'll have your scorecard errors, and then they charge you for scorecard errors on your business customer gateway. So that's for people that are doing full service. We want to check multiple input names. Sometimes you'll get an address record where a single address record has Jane Doe and John Smith both together. So we tell it we'll check for all names. Going back 48 months, and then we've got this review window. You can turn that off if you don't want to see that, but we'll go ahead and leave it in there, and just so you can see how that works. Notice here we've got this address formatting screen. This is the same thing as I was showing you there under address correction. You can see here, apply casing to business names if you're doing mixed case. That's because move update actually runs address correction as well as the move update process. It's part of the requirements of the Postal Service. So if you know you're going to run move update as part of your list, you can actually skip running address correction as a separate step. So if you're just in production mode and you're just going to want to plow through it and get it done, you can skip running address correction separately. There's a couple of reasons why you might want to do address correction as a separate step, but if you know you're going to run move update on the list, just go straight to move update. It'll run address correction first, then it'll do the move update, and it'll create the CAS report that you can show to your post office proving that you ran address correction. So same idea, we're connecting to the server, and you notice here on this progress screen, we've got address correction on the left, and it'll come back here in a minute. I'm not sure where it went. There it is. So it's going to show address correction on the left, and then move update on the right. And then here's the review window. So this window is showing us the input address here, PO Box 278, getting replaced by PO Box 3. So when I click this accept button, that address line, this is probably an address line 1, that address is going to get updated with this one here. But we don't delete the original address. Instead, what we do is if we find an address that needs to be updated by a move update, we take that original address and we preserve it on the address record a little bit farther down in a group of fields that start with the word original, so that you can always get back to what your original address was before the move update changed it. So we'll do accept on that. Here's one, PO Box again getting replaced by this Emmanuel Church Road address. So we do accept. Really not going to change anything on here. It's just a matter of either accept or not accept. So we'll go ahead and do accept all. If you were to, one thing to be aware of, if you were to close this box by using the red X, it will preserve the what's called the metadata about the move. So it'll preserve things like the move date and the match type. That'll get saved, but it will not update the actual delivery address. So you should be aware of that. You want to choose accept all and let it go ahead and do those updates. Otherwise, it won't update the address itself. We'll close that down. Okay, now that we've run a couple of these processes, let's go back and take a look at the results in views. So here's that move update view. We'll go ahead and open this guy up. And if we scroll up here, you'll see, so we've got these fields, NCOA link, move effective date, match flag, move type. These are all fields, again, what was called that metadata. So it's a data about the move. It's not the actual new address. It's just information about the move. And you can see a lot of these are blank. And you may recall how I mentioned that move update processing does both address correction and then it does move update. Well, the requirement is because the address before it can be checked for move update has to prove that it can pass address correction, or basically we have to prove that we have a delivery point confirmation on the address before we'll even bother to check to see if the person moved. So the fact that, so the match flag field here, the fact that this is blank tells me that these addresses didn't even get checked. And the reason they didn't get checked most likely is because they failed address correction. So if we come over here and you'll notice how the zip code, there's no zip +4. So that's a pretty good indicator that these addresses never got checked for move update because they failed address correction. This one here, it did get checked. A match flag of N equals no match found. Match flags, there's not too many of them, and one good place to find the what the match flags mean is to go up to where it says help and help using bulk mailer. And then if we go down here to this little box here, here's all your error codes. We're going to talk about, these are address correction error codes. We're going to talk about those in a little bit, but let's take a look at the match flags. And so you can see there's not too many of them. N is probably the most common, means that the address was checked, but no address, so there's no change of address on file. The next one would be M. This address was checked and a new record was updated. But then these here are good to be aware of. So this tells us that the person did file a change of address, but they moved out of the country. Or in a case here, they filed a change of address, but they didn't provide a forwarding address. So you get probably about 10% of the moves that move update finds are going to come back with one of these codes that indicate that we know the person moved, but we don't know where they moved to. And those are good to be aware of. Again, if you're mailing anything that's private in nature, you're probably going to want to exclude these from your mailing so that you don't inadvertently mail something private in nature to the wrong address. So these are called match flags. And again, there's not too many of them. It's probably one of the good fields to get to know in bulk mailer. And I found the definitions for them here by going to bulk mailer help and then clicking on the NCOA match flags. While we're on the topic of help, I'd like to bring up the community at this point. So as part of your subscription, you get a login to the community account, and this is what it looks like here when you log in. Well, that's not what it looks like. Hold on. Yeah, here we go. So so the Quadient community, you log in and you can find your products listed. If you have issues or questions, you create what are called cases, and you can manage your cases in here. So you can send us your questions directly. But most importantly, is if you're getting stuck on something and you've tried the help button in bulk mailer, but even that's not helping you, then when you log into the community, go ahead and put your question or some keywords up here and do a search on it. So for example, installing, if you have questions on installing, here's how to install or upgrade registration keys. That's for Satori Architect. How to determine, here's install version application. So there's lots of good useful information here. If you have an error message or something, you can check on that. But let's take a look at match flags, since we're talking about match flags. So beyond just the description of what they are, there's articles here that talk about they talk about what the match flags are for. And here's one on how to improve NCOA match rates. So here's an article that explains, so what it's talking about here is, how to make sure that you're getting all of the moves that are posted to update your list. So again, these are just examples of some of the articles in the community. So you want to make sure that you are logging in and taking advantage of this, because this can save you a lot of times. We are adding, every week we're adding probably another 5 or 10 knowledge base articles. So there's lots and lots of really good information, and especially in the cases where it's like some new issue has come up. So now, for example, we've got the informed visibility, which raises a lot of questions. And we should have some, yeah, so here's what is the USPS informed visibility, or the informed delivery? This is informed delivery. Pretty sure we've got some ones on the informed visibility as well. So definitely, take advantage of the resources here on the community. Okay, so we'll put that aside, get back to bulk mailer. There he is. Okay, so the match flags. N indicates that the match was found, and pardon me, indicates that it was checked, but no match was found. And let's see, I've got a question that came through here. If we want to keep out a do not mail list from every mailing, is there an easy way to do that using groups or views? Yeah, that's a really good question. So we'll talk about that when we get down to groups, or actually we'll talk about that a little bit as part of address quality. Okay, so move update results on this screen. Let's go take a look at the basic address view, and we're going to see the address correction. So these two fields here, this one called error description and error code, these get populated during address correction processing. And the rule of thumb on these is if the error code is above 100, then it failed DPV even to the primary, to the main street address. If it's one of these ones in the 90s, it failed for the secondary, meaning the apartment, it's either missing or invalid. And if it's above 100, then it's what we call an uncorrected record. It failed completely. So like these 494s. And one way you can tell these is after you run address correction, if it's still showing a 5-digit zip code, that means that it failed address correction. I'm going to show you a screen that's really handy to look at when you drill down into, if you want to look at a specific address. This one up here, you click on the button. This is like a toggle button. So if I click on detail, it's going to take that address, put it on a single screen, and then I've got these tabs down here that show me all of the fields related. So we've got CAS related fields here, move update and DPV results on that one. So these fields here, you could find these in the full record view, but look how nice it is to have them all together specifically underneath the address that you're looking at. So this one here, 494 because of invalid PO. So this is apparently an invalid PO box in that community. If we step through, if you get one that says no significant changes, that means that the address came through with flying colors, nothing had to be changed. Let's go, and then here I'm going to toggle back to the list view to find something a little more interesting. And let's see. Yeah, let's take a look at this one. So I'm going to switch back to that detail view. So no significant changes. Here's one thing that you should be aware of. You can check address in this screen here. You can check addresses to, if you've got some addresses that failed address correction, you can check addresses to see if you can fix them. So I removed the DR, that's called the street name suffix. So that's drive. I remove that off of the address. And if I go up to this single check mark, it'll go through, it'll rerun address correction, and it's not going to work because it's looking for my address correction files. Looks like I've got it's looking for the local address correction files, and Looks like that is not going to work for me today. Let me take a quick look here. Just a moment here. See if I can fix this quickly. And bulk mailer, data files. Yeah, let's try that one more time. Let's see. So it looks like I've got mismatching. These are called the address correction files. They all end in .cis. I've got local address correction files installed, and it's trying to use those, and it's apparently not working because I've got kind of a mismatch of address correction files. Just before the class, I ran the update, and it asked me to reboot, and I didn't have time to reboot, so I didn't. It said skip rebooting, and it looks like it's probably got something it needs to finish after I do the reboot. But so take my word for it. In this field here, in this screen here, if you've got local address correction files installed, you can go ahead and do address checking right in this screen here. So we'll go ahead and save that one. The move update results. Let's go to another record here. The move update results are here. It shows there's the match flag, gives a little definition. This is called the NCOA footnote. And then here's the DPV results. One thing to look for when we get to groups, we'll talk about the all deliverable group, and quite often records will get dumped into the all deliverable group because of they're listed as vacant. This one here is a no stat. DPV is no stat. So these are kind of additional bits of information that we get from USPS when we do the address correction processing. All right, so let's go back to the list view. And again, just to recap, error description, error code, these two fields get populated during address correction. And if we go to the move update view, these fields get populated during move update processing: match flag, move type, move effective date. Maybe one more thing, we'll take a look at one that got updated. So here's one where we can see we found a match. There's an M, the move type B for business. And if we scroll over, we'll see those original address fields I mentioned. So if we got a new address, PO Box 3, it gets populated in the working address field. So here's the address line 1, address line 2. So those are the ones that are going to go on the address label. They get updated when you click that accept all. And the original address that you brought in gets bumped over to these fields. So you can get back to it if you need it, but it's not going to be in the main working fields, which will get used for addressing. So that's basically how address correction works, or pardon me, address and move update processing works. I think a quick question. So the question here coming in from Kevin, he's trying to apply a what's called a do not mail list. Sometimes people call it a kind of a merge or a purge list or a kill list or something like that. So let's say you have 50,000 records, and then you've got this list of 1,000 that you want to knock out of that 50,000 master list so that they don't get used. For that, we have this feature called merge purge. And that goes beyond the scope of this program. It's an add-on feature, and the merge purge can, here, let's take a look at just the opening screen. It's a pretty good graphic. Here's the 3 options you can use with merge purge. So what Kevin's asking about is to do this one here. So you combine a bunch of input files, and then you have that knockout list, and it can be 1 or more files. That's the exclusion list. As you can see, these are the ones. So basically, here's your master file, and then anything in the exclusion list removes it out of that master file. So when you go to mail, you've got just the result. You can this one here, this is basically just deduping. You've got a bunch of lists and you're deduping them, or you can do ones where this one's less frequently seen, but we want just the group where the address appears in both files. Now, I will tell you this, Kevin. Yeah, that's a merge purge. That's an add-on feature. There is a way to do what you're talking about doing, just using duplication search. There's a couple different methods people have figured out, just using the dedupe process, which is part of the program. You don't have to pay extra for it. And it involves basically you import your master list, you make sure to mark those records. And you remember how the way to do that, one way to do that anyway, is, I got to open my mailing list, sorry. So go back to views. So you import your master list first. You come up here, change the contents of a field, and give yourself a flag in one of these user text fields, so you know it's the master list. Then you import your knockout list, and you import it twice, and then you do a dedupe process, and it will knock out the knockout list because there's automatically dedupes. There's automatically duplicates in the knockout list because you've imported it twice. And anything that matches it in the master list will get knocked out. And then the last thing you do is you go through and you make sure that before you do your mailing that there's nothing left that doesn't have that indicator that you put in when you did this change contents of a field. So again, you put a flag on your master list, and then you import that knockout list twice, and then you run dedupe, and that should remove the knockout list records as well as anything that from the master list that matches it. And then just as the last sanity check, you go and you make sure that everything that you're mailing has that indicator flag that you've put on there using the Mass Edit Records tool. Hope that helps. Okay. Andrews quality, so we're done with that. Unless there's any other questions, we'll go. Let's go ahead and talk about groups. All right, so the group step here is an optional step. You know, if you're doing a mailing, you don't need to select any groups if you're just going straight through and doing a mailing. But let's talk about that situation where you're mailing something private in nature, you know, medical records, financial records, etc. In that case, you're going to probably want to take a look at one of these groups. It's called the All Deliverable group. But before we do that, let's take a look at a simpler one here. And let's take a look at the All Move Update records. So I'm going to double click on this guy, and it's going to select only records that were updated by the Move Update process. So you can see it found 12. So if I say yes, you'll notice, just like we saw when we were doing filtering with views, I've only got 12 records in my current count. So whatever step I take along here is only going to see those 12 active records, including viewing. So if I go up here to view and open up the Move Update information view, I only see 12 records, and look at that, every one of them is a Move Update record. See, they've all got Move Update results one way or the other. So let's say I wanted to give this list back to the list owner. You know, as part of my service, you know, I'm going to do the mailing for you. That's the main service. But one of my ancillary services I can provide is to give you a list of all the addresses where the person has filed a change of address. So how do I get it out of my list? How do I get it out of my full batch of 2009 records without having, you know, just to pick them out one at a time? I go to groups, highlight the All Move Update Records group, run that group. It selects all the records that match my criteria. And then I go to import export, and I come down here and I run the export wizard to select out the address fields, and probably want to include also those metadata NCOA fields, things like match flag, move effective date, business type, you know, that sort of thing. So I could create a nice output file with these 12 records and send it back to the list owner and say, hey, here's the group of addresses where people apparently have moved. You may want to update your records. Another option for groups, all uncorrected records. So here's all the addresses that failed address correction. Looks like there's 53. We say yes on that. And if I go to views, one thing I'll probably notice here is, we'll go to the basic address view. One thing you'll notice, the zip code. All just 5-digit zip codes. So these records, and if we go to that detail view and we take a look at it, the CAS results, we can see failed DPV, invalid primary. As we step through these, you can see they're all above 100. That error code is above 100. So That means that they just could not be validated. Now, we are able to determine the carrier route because it falls within the range. But if it if it doesn't even fall within the primary range for that street, then you won't even get a carrier route. So so that's the groups. Let's go take a look now at this all deliverable group. And if I double click that, it's going to pull out 1,227 records. And you can see that's quite a decrement from that's quite a bit fewer records than the total. So we're excluding quite a few records out of this 2009 total. So basically the way you look at that is that these are the records, or these are the addresses that passed every possible address correction test. And anything that had even one issue is going to get excluded from this list. So if I'm doing a mailing for first class letters, invoices, medical statements, this is the go-to, this would be the safest option. And then after you've done your mailing, you have to tell the list owner, guess what, there's a bunch of those I didn't mail. So you go to the undeliverable records. And this should give us the reciprocal amount. So now we've got 782 records that didn't get mailed. And the first question out of the list owner is, well, what do you mean? We check our addresses. Why didn't you mail those? Well, the answer is going to be found on either the CAS results or this move update. Between these two tabs, you will find out why that address got excluded from the all deliverable group. So this one's pretty obvious, 491. It's got a high error code. That one's pretty obvious. But let's go find ones. We get this question a lot. Let's go find ones that have have an error code of 0. So we'll go to the detail here, and we can see no significant changes. We've got an error code of 0. So why is this one getting excluded? To find out, let's go to the move update. We can see, okay, it was checked. The no move was found. That's no reason to exclude it. But over here, you'll see it says DPV vacant. That's one of the criteria in the all deliverable group. If it's marked, if it comes back from after address correction, it shows as a vacant, then we put it in the undeliverable group because presumably it can't be mailed to. So again, the all deliverable group, good group to use if you're doing anything private in nature. But it's inevitably going to bring up questions about why didn't these addresses pass the tests, and if you're looking at them in bulk mailer, this is a really easy way to look at them. And again, remember, each one of these, even including the vacant, there's a field in the full record view called DPV vacant. So any one of these indicators you're seeing on this screen, you could also find it in the full record view. But like I said, here it is, DPV vacant. So you can find it here. So if I was going to export this list of 782 records back to the list owner, I would want to include all the fields that are being checked. So including this vacant field to indicate that even though it's a valid delivery point, the delivery point is known as vacant, or it's marked as vacant. You can see there's quite a few here. So again, just one quick look at the community, because we get this question quite often. So all deliverable, if you want to read about the all deliverable group, using the all deliverable group to minimize return mail, this is a really good article. You should go ahead and take a look at this one. And talks about all the different, all the different criteria. So you can see, here's all the criteria that gets used. So it's checking those match flags. If you might remember, I was mentioning those match flags for the move update results. If it's found a move and there's a forwarding address, that's a good address. We're going to mail to it. But if it's found a move where the person does not have a forwarding address for some reason, then we want to exclude that from the mailing, because we know that the person moved and we don't know where they moved to. Therefore, we can't be sure that the letter is going to get to the recipient. And so the all deliverable group takes that into account, and it excludes these ones that have match flags where there's no forwarding address. It excludes the ones that are in the error code 90, 92, 93, because those are the ones where either the apartment number or the suite number is either missing or invalid. So that's why it excludes quite a few. If you're in the groups and you right click on it, you can see those same conditions. And if you take the next step, you can see each one of these conditions is listed here. So we've had some people modify it. They say, you know, the 92s, the 93s, I don't care about. Those are the ones where the secondary is invalid. I want to go ahead and remove those. Oops, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to delete those out of my group. And so now when I run my group, it's going to be less exclusive. You know, it'll allow those ones where the apartment number, the suite number is apparently invalid. I can let those go through, and then I'm not excluding as many. I still want to exclude the ones with the, with the match flag and if they're marked as vacant, etc. So you can fiddle with these, the settings behind these groups. What I'd recommend, and you can do this with this operation, you could do this with any of the templates. If you right click on it, you can choose duplicate, and then you get a copy of it. And so I'm going to call this all deliverable records, and then that includes, come on, 92 and 93 or something like that. You know, you do something to kind of indicate that it's a variation on the original. That way you keep the original, you just make a duplicate of it, and then you can modify. So then you would come in, open this, go next, go down here, 92, we'll delete that one, yes. 93, we'll delete that condition, yes, and then do finish. And that was the undeliverable records, yeah. So so the groups come in handy. You don't have to use them, but they certainly come in handy. You can create your own groups from scratch. Here's one where it excludes Chicago. Here's one that picks out states, it's either Ohio or Illinois. Here's one based on a user text field. So you can create your own groups and, you know, select your own batch of records. You can have multiple criteria in there. Or you can just skip it. You know, if you're just doing a straight up mailing and nobody's concerned about misdirected mail, you could just skip it and just go straight on through. And then here's the, you recall I mentioned, if you want to make sure you get back to your all records being active, there's a group for that. All active records group. We double click on that, say yes. That'll get us back to our 2009 records. And if we go back to the views, and we'll take a look at the basic address view, scroll to the top, and there's April, Luke, and Troy still there right at the top of the line, top of the list. So that's the all active records group. That brings everything back to active. Okay, so we got to keep moving here. Mail sorting. So here, this is the other half of the program. I think of any kind of mailing program, the first half is always about address quality and making sure your records are in good shape and you've got the postal data that you need. The second half is the sorting process, the postal sorting process. And this is where we follow the rules of the DMM laid out by the Postal Service and put the letters group the letters into trays and group the trays into delivery locations, and then create a postage statement and hopefully save a lot of money. So like the other processes, it all starts with the wizard. Notice there are these templates as well, and those templates are just ways of saving the settings from the initial one that you create in the wizard. So we'll do that as well. Okay, the mail sort wizard has two versions. This one here that I opened up right now, I've got this is called the Power Wizard, and this has nearly all of the settings on one screen. There's still a couple of submenus like this one here for the intelligent mail settings, but the most of the settings you can see are on one screen. And this is kind of I kind of like this one. This was helpful to me when I was learning about mail sorting because it's interactive. So for example, this is set for standard mail letters, and I can choose these discounts. I want SCF, NDC, but if I switch over to first class mail, you notice how they're grayed out now, and that's because these discounts are not eligible for first class mail is not eligible for entry discounts. But first class mail, I can come down and have a single piece option for my mail sorting levels. But if I switch back to standard mail, you'll notice now I don't get the single piece option. So you can see how they're kind of interactive on this big wizard. By default, the program uses what's called we call it the step-by-step wizard, or just the regular wizard. And so to see that, I'm going to uncheck this box. So if we do actions here, you can see now use Power Wizard is not selected. And now when I open the Power Wizard, I get a welcome screen, and I basically get the same settings, but I get them all on one step at a time. So it's a little bit easier to digest for people that are new at the mailing business. Here's where I select the class of mail and piece type. So I've got standard mail letters. Over on the right, it shows me what the valid ranges are for a letter. So the width can be 5 inches. The maximum width is 11.5. What if it's a flat? Now the width is 6 inches and the maximum can be 15 inches. So you can see it kind of shows you the boundaries for the piece type that you're working with. On the next screen, here's where you define your actual mail piece. So you put in your height and the width and thickness. General guideline here is when it comes to measuring thickness, you don't want to try to measure the thickness of a single piece. It's much better to to grab maybe 20 pieces and then lay them up on, stack them up on a table, and then measure how tall it is, and then use that as a guideline, and then take those 20 pieces, put them on a scale, and see how many ounces it weighs. So again, scales are usually not that accurate down in the kind of the lower ranges. So generally, you want to make sure you're working with a sample size, at least 20, 50 would be better, or you can kind of eyeball it. But the thing to remember is this thickness directly impacts the number of the number of letters that get assigned to a tray. So if you find your trays are generally way too loose, or there's way too many letters to be able to even fit them into a single tray, you have to come back to this thickness setting and change it, because they're just tied directly together. Okay, somehow my thickness is off. Thickness 0.5, 20 pieces. There we go, like that better. Okay, this screen here, we indicate the mail drop zip code and the mailing date. So we'll pick out a mailing date here. These are optional. They pop through on Postal One and on the postage statement, so they're helpful when tracking, trying to keep track of which mailing is which when you're looking at a big list of them on Postal One. And then down here is the permit, what I like to call the permit template. The permit template is kind of a discussion of its own. So at this point, we're going to kind of break away and just talk about permit templates in general. And it's actually a wizard within a wizard. For those of you out there who are mail service providers, I've got a tip for you, so pay close attention. I'm going to start with the people who what we call are mail owners / mail preparers. So these are people who work for organizations. You could be a water company, insurance company, it could be university, mail shop. But basically, you're not doing mailings for hire. You're not doing mailings for outside clients and charging for it. The people that are mail service providers, they're in the business of doing mailings as a service, and that's what their business provides. So we're going to start with the first one we're talking about are mail owner permits. So I've got one here. I'm going to right click on it, choose edit, or I could double click on it to open it up. And like I said, it's a wizard within the mail sort wizard. These permits, once you set them up, you generally don't have to go back and change them very often. So most of the time, when you go through your mail sorting process, you're just going to select which permit you want to use and move on. But you have to set them up initially. So that's what we're talking about right now. So in the permit, we're going to select mail owner. If I'm a mail service provider, I'm in the mailing business, and then I'm going to select mailing agent. But again, we're going to talk about what we call mail owner, mail preparer first. Here's your permit number. The date issued is really not super important, but this one is. You want to put in this right here, the ZIP +4 of the issuing post office. And you can get that on your Postal One Business Customer Gateway. If you log into Business Customer Gateway, look for in the shortcuts, look for Manage Permits, and if you drill down, you'll find the issuing post office. If you got it wrong, and you do electronic submission, it's going to fail when you try to submit the mailing. So this permit 87 is issued by this the post office that this zip was for. Those two have to go together. If not, when you submit, it's going to fail. So that's the first screen. This is basically about the mail owner and the account. And then you fill out your contact information. You put in your CRID and your MID, and boom, you're done. So that's the easy one. Mail owner, you're not doing mailing for outside clients. Just to rehash that again, you make sure you check mail owner, and then step through it and fill out all the information, and you're done. For those of you who are in the mail service provider category or the mailing agent category, we're going to take a look at one of these. And there's a time saver tip that I'm going to show you here in just a minute. But first, we're going to step through it. Mailing agent, and by selecting that, what's going to happen is that this screen is the same as the one we saw before. This screen, mailing agent, this middle screen becomes the mailing agent, and then the third screen becomes the mail owner. So if you check this option here, you're going to have 3 screens to fill out, and they roughly correspond to, or they directly correspond to those 3 screens at the top of the postage statement. The one at the top left is about the account, so the permit and the account number and the CRID for the permit holder. The middle screen is the mailing agent screen, and then the third screen on the top right is the mail owner screen. So here's the tip. Let me finish on that. You have a new mail. The first time you fill out one of these, it's a hassle because you have to find all those postal credentials and fill them all in. You don't want to go through that again from scratch. And if you start with the mailing permit wizard, everything's blank. So let's say a new client walks in the door, they decide that they're going to have you do the mailing for them. What you do is you find one where you've already got a mail owner set up, and it's using the permit. Most of the time, you're using your own permit. You find a permit, you right-click on it, and you choose duplicate. So you duplicate that permit. The first screen, you're the mailing agent, you're using your permit most likely. All of this is the same, don't have to touch it. Here's your mailing agent information. It's already filled out, everything's perfect, don't have to touch it. The only thing you need to do is the mail owner. You need to delete everything here, put in who your new mail owner is, and then give it a name that indicates that mail owner, so that when you see it listed up here, you can see who the mail owner is, either by the name of the permit or by looking over on the right. So again, for the mail service provider, the shortcut is take an existing permit template that you've got already set up, right-click on it, choose duplicate. Once you duplicate it, then you go through, you don't have to touch the first couple of screens. The third screen, you delete everything and then put in who the new mail owner is, and then give it a name that indicates that mail owner. Okay, so that's the shortcut tip for permits. So backing up a step, like I said, permits are things you set up and typically don't have to change them. You want to make sure you get that ZIP+4 correct. You want to make sure you get your CRID and your MIDs in there, mailer IDs and your customer registration IDs. You want to make sure you get all that information in there correctly. The way to look that up, don't call your post office and ask them. Go to your business customer gateway and look it up on there. And if you click on manage permits, you'll be able to get all that information. Okay, so that ends the discussion on mailing permit. Just to kind of get us back into sequence, I'm going to start over again. So we've got mail. So we've done all our address quality steps, and now we're ready to do our mail sorting. Start up the mail sort wizard, click through it, standard mail machinable letters. Here's our piece weight and so forth. Piece dimension, we select who the mail owner is, who we're doing the mailing for. Make sure we get the right zip code. Select the mailing date and click next. This screen here, most of you are probably not going to use. This is if you're submitting your electronic documentation through mail.dat, you have to fill this out. If you're going to submit, most people use bulk mailer, use this button here. It's called, over on the left here, submit. This uses a technology called mail.xml versus mail.dat. So mail.xml using the submit button is quicker in that there's fewer steps in that it just extracts the information straight out of bulk mailer, opens up a dialog, a web service dialog with the postal service, and creates the postage statement on your Postal One account all in one step. And like I said, that's usually the one most people use because it's the fewest number of steps. The mail.dat, at the end of the mail sorting process, you have to save the mail.dat files, and then you have to go to you have to go to the business customer gateway and get a utility that's used called the MD client or the mail.dat client that's used to upload those mail.dat files. The advantage of mail.dat, one of the advantages is that it does it outside of bulk mailer so that you don't have to wait for bulk mailer to finish submitting. If you have a really large job, the submit process directly out of bulk mailer might take 20 minutes or an hour. And with mail.dat, since it's uploading outside of bulk mailer, that allows you to go back into bulk mailer and start processing another job rather than waiting for it to finish submitting the first job. So again, mail.dat, most of the time, you're just going to leave this blank. Here's our sort levels, and bulk mailer can sort this carrier out LOT, that's basic carrier out. Carrier out WS, that's a walk sequence, and this one simplified addressing is the same thing as what it's now being called EDDM, or Every Door Direct Marketing. There's a lot of settings here, some optional settings that you can get to. If you want to go through these, go ahead and just be sure to click on the help button. And the nice thing about the help in bulk mailer is that it jumps right to the topics that are on that screen. So for example, here's tray order and unsorted pieces. If you look in here, you can see here's the tray order and unsorted pieces. So it gives you a lot of additional information, and it's what they call context sensitive. So it knows what screen you're on when you click help, and it brings up information about those options. If you're going to do pallets, you have to have a pallet add-on, but you would click this button, you check the box, you specify what features you want for your pallet. And then here's the Intelligent Mail settings screen. So the Intelligent Mail barcode transmits a lot of information to the Postal Service. Besides just delivery information, it also includes information about what services you want applied to that mailing. So there's this service called Address Change Service that you can sign up for, or your mail owners might have this. Address Change Service kind of does the same thing as NCOA, but rather than fixing the address before you mail it, it sends you a notification after you've mailed it saying that, hey, this person has moved. And the expectation is that if you're like an insurance company or a bank or something, you're mailing kind of the same group of addresses on a monthly basis. The idea is that you get this Address Change Service notification, and then you update your main system, so the next time you do the mailing, you get the correct address. Some people were very critical to get to ensure deliverability. They do both NCOA and Address Change Service, because NCOA isn't quite as good at catching matching address change of addresses. The Address Change Service does a little bit better job, especially in the case of like hyphenated last names and things like that. So some people, banks in particular, will run both NCOA, and then the few stragglers that might get through, they'll get them picked up with the Address Change Service. So, but in short, if you have that service, you want to check this box, and then there's a number of options that you select for that particular change service. If you're doing full service intelligent mail, be aware that you must submit your postage statement electronically. So you can't check full service and then just try to bring in the postage statement on paper. One of the requirements of full service is that you use the electronic submission. So that's either the mail.dat that I talked about earlier, or this mail.xml using the submit button. IMB tracing for tracing, that gives you information about your mail pieces as they work through the postal system. So basically that barcode, when it gets scanned, a notification can be sent letting you know what facility scanned it, what date scanned, and what date it was scanned. That's IMB tracing. Those scans are, they're not grouped in any kind of way. So if you do a lot of different mailings and you sign up for IMB tracing, or now it's called informed visibility, you're going to get just kind of miscellaneous emails with just kind of raw data. We have a feature or a product called EasyTrack. If you sign up for EasyTrack, you can check this box, and we'll get those scans for you, and then we put them into a nice report so you can much more easily see how your mailing is moving, or you can identify particular specific pieces whether they got delivered or not, or whether they made it to the delivery post office. All right, mailer ID. You could have either the mail owner's mailer ID or the mailing agent's mailer ID used as part of that barcode. And then sequencing each if you're doing full service or any one of these services, each mail piece gets its own what's called sequence number applied to it, so that makes each barcode uniquely identifiable over a 45-day period. So again, these are all the settings for the intelligent mail barcode. And then entry discounts. If you're if you're taking the mail directly to the SCF or the NDC, you could check these boxes, and you'll get a discount for entering it right at that larger facility, as opposed to just dropping it at your local post office. Then this last one is the tray label layout, and this has to do with the PDF that gets created with all the tray tags. Be aware that if this is mailer information, by default, it's going to say Satori Software or Quadient Software down here, and then it'll have Seattle, Washington. So you want to make sure on this screen, if you've got a brand new installation of bulk mailer, make sure you step through and update this to be your organization's address. And then here's the summary screen. We're going to run it based on the settings, but while we're at it, let's save these settings so that I'm going to go STD for standard mail, letters, August 2018. So give it a template name so we can get back to it later. And then here's our mail sort progress. The thing to look for on this progress screen is the sort levels. So I'm sorting both addresses that have DPV confirmation, so they're what we call automation compatible addresses, as well as non-automation compatible addresses. So that'd be the ones that only had the 5-digit zip code that had error codes above 100. So I'm expecting that most of them are going to end up in the automation, and then here are those 54 that failed address correction. They fall down into this non-automation category. Costs a little bit more to mail them. There's less likelihood they'll get to the recipient, but I want to include them. So in this case, the list owner is not concerned about privacy. They just want to get the message out, and so we're going to send everything. So this gives you a quick indication that things went well. If all of these pieces ended up down in the non-automation category, then I'd know that something went wrong in address correction, because most of them should be getting the automation category. All right, so the mail sorting is done. We're going to take a look at the reports. This report down here, this is actually the postage statement here. This postage report is a qualification report and the tray labels. These two are not USPS reports, but they're really handy, and we'll take a look at a couple of them here just so you can see what they look like. So this is the mail sort summary. Again, this is not a postal report. This is for you and I to look at. If there's any questions about the way the mail got sorted, this will be the first thing that we down here at the support office are going to want to look at, because it just gives us a quick idea of what's going on. So we can see standard mail letters, we can see the piece dimensions, we can see if there was any SCF drops, we can see how many pieces got sorted in the different categories, what date the mailing was. And getting to be more important these days is on page 2, it'll show us which barcode was used in the which mailer ID was used in the barcode, and what the sequencing was set to. So in this case, I can see the sequence numbers that were applied to these barcodes is 1 through 2009, and it was run as full service. Another handy indicator on this one is the top right is this Postal One job ID. So there's a way to search. So if you do lots and lots of mailings and you submit them all to Postal One, there's a search screen on Postal One when you go to the dashboard. It's called the mailer reference number, I think, on their screen, but you can actually search for your mailings by this number. Also, if you get notified by your post office about a scorecard error, if you drill down on your Postal One scorecard, you'll get to the screen where it actually tells you which mailing was the offending mailing that broke some rule. Either maybe it had duplicate barcode numbers, or it had too many missed NCOA or too many missed change of addresses. If you look on that, if you drill down to that screen and look at the details, it'll show you this postal and job ID, and so that allows you to then trace it back to which mailing in bulk mailer was the one that caused that problem. So that's the mail sort summary. If we get to page 3, here's the actual postage statement. So you can look at this, eyeball that, make sure that the postage amount is within the expected range. And then here's the qualification report. This one here is called the container listing report. Again, this is not a USPS report, but it's handy for the people that are doing the production part. Stuffing the trays. Shows them how many trays. You notice this prep here, indicator B, stands for bundling, so that's required. It looks like all of these are going to be required to be bundled because they're pretty small trays. If you're doing automation and you have full trays, then if it's a full tray, they don't typically need to be bundled. And then here are the the tray tags. So these get cut up, and then you stick them on the front of the trays. So that's the postage reports. Number 3, files. Here's where you save the mail.dat files. So this is the alternate method for submitting electronic postage statements. And so it kind of takes a detour at this point. If you do the save the mail.dat files, then you can use that external client to upload them, and then you can keep working in bulk mailer rather than waiting for the submit button to finish processing. Then we've got the mail piece. Down here, what this is basically a shortcut to the printing feature built into bulk mailer. So you can see here this print mail. Once you've set up a few print templates in print mail, then you can use this to go straight to one of those templates. But we're going to talk about printing here in the next step, so we're not going to do that at this time. All right, so we've sorted the mail. We hit close. If we need to get back to that postage statement, there's a couple of ways. One is you can click here on Actions and then go to Reprint Reports. And a bulk mailer will keep track of the number of times or it'll keep track of all the sort results for the last 10 mail sorts. So, if sometimes you want to sort it more than once to make sure you get all the settings right, or maybe you do like a quote for the client the first time through, and then once the job's been approved and you've got more specific data, then you can rerun it a second time, and then you'll be able to compare the two outputs by looking at those postage statements. And we saved a template. So if we were to rerun this mail sort, we could double click on this. And again, see how we can go straight to the finish button, or we can step through it, maybe make some modifications. There is one, if you rerun a mail sort on a given mailing file, there is one question that's going to pop up for you. And there it is, sequence numbers. So what this is about is that the first time we sorted the mail, it assigned a group of sequence numbers to the barcodes. So again, each barcode gets its own separate unique sequence number. And there's a limited pool of sequence numbers for every mailer ID. So mailer ID, 9-digit mailer ID gets 999,900. Basically one less than a million sequence numbers. And they can't be reused within a 45-day period. The program, just to be on the safe side, won't reuse them for 60 days. And so you can imagine, you say you do a number of mailings, and then maybe you've got a really big job, 120,000 pieces, and you want to make sure you get it right, and you sort it, 5 or 6 times. Pretty soon you're going to use up all those sequence numbers. So just in the testing process. So we want to make sure that you have the option to preserve those sequence numbers and only use new ones if it's actually going out to get mailed. So that's why it's asking, have the previous results been submitted to the post office? If you say yes on this, then it's going to assign a new batch of sequence numbers to this next mail sort that you do. If the first time you sorted it was just a test, then you're going to want to say no. In fact, most of the time, you're probably going to want to say no on this. Because if you're resorting it, it's most likely you're resorting it because you're going to make a change, maybe changing the mailing date, maybe changing the piece weight, who knows. But you're making a change to it, and that means that the original mail sort probably never saw the light of day, in which case it didn't go to the post office, and you're going to say no. on this sequence number question. So we'll step all the way through, we do finish, and it's going to sort it again. I would expect we'll get the same results, but one thing we'll see is that when we go to the reprint reports, we're going to see an option where we can see both of those mail sort results. So if we come back up here, reprint reports, and there you can see that there's the one that we did at 11:41. Here's the one at 11:49. So again, it keeps track. We could go back. You can even save the mail.dats for each one of these separately. Those are going to be different files. And so it's a handy feature. Again, keep all the stuff that happened for this particular job, keep it all together in this one mailing file. That reprint reports is available down here as well. So if you're in the home screen, you can get to it here as well. All right, so let's move ahead. We'll talk about printing. When it comes time to printing, we're either going to print it from bulk mailer, or we're going to print it, export it, and give it to somebody else to print. If you're going to print it from bulk mailer, we have these print mail templates that you can do. They're basically layouts where you can put the address block and indicia, that sort of thing, onto a layout, and then go ahead and just drive the printer. Bulk mailer will work with whatever printer is installed on that Windows computer. So here we'll do envelopes, and I'm going to do the RENA Imager 3.0. By the way, if you have one of these purpose-built letter printers, the RENAs, the Neopost, Pitney Bowes, whatever, you want to make sure you pick it out of this direct impression option. Even though they're technically using inkjet cartridges, they're a special type of printer. They're called direct impression. Number 10 envelope, address with barcode. So we set that, and we're going to create a new template for it. And then here we'll have it in a moment. Here it is. Okay, so this is the design view of the layout. Here's our address block. We can move it around. We can add extra elements to it, to the layout. And then we can preview what it looks like before we print. So in the layout view, you just see the name of the fields that are there. But in the preview, we see the actual data of the mail pieces. And I don't know why this thing's way over there. And we can step through the mail pieces there, so you can see the the various letters. Now, one thing you want to watch for, this is one of those printers that has fixed heads, and it's got two heads with 3 cartridges each, and that's what these little kind of tractor lines are showing. This would be cartridge 1, cartridge 2, cartridge 3, and in one of the heads, and then this is the 3 cartridges in the other head. You want to make sure that the cartridge interface is not slicing through one of your data lines. Especially, you don't want it to hit the barcode. So we can kind of scooch that up. You can use the arrow key to kind of make minor adjustments to that. And okay, so that looks good. Let's say we want to add a database field. Come up here to this tool up here, database field, and click down here, and say we're going to add the sort position and add the tray number. So we've got these kind of over here, so that as we're printing, if something goes wrong, we can just let them print on through, and then go back later and reprint the ones that might get smudged. So that's sort position 9. So that's going to be page number 9 and tray number 2. So when it comes to actually printing, then we're going to click the print button. And that'll bring up the print dialog here in a moment. There it is. So it doesn't automatically start printing when you hit that button. You can choose here, we're just going to print the current page as a test, or maybe we want to do pieces 1 through 5, just to make sure that things are looking good. And then for most, this doesn't work in for every printer and for every operating system, but it works for most of them. You can tell it to pause between bundles or container, and container would be like the the tray or the sack is what that's referring to. Okay, so that is how you do a layout and how you control your printing. Again, you're going to save templates and then the submit button. Now, I think I'm going to go back through my mail sort one more time because I think that the mid was not correct. One of my templates here. There we go. That one looks better. Yes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and submit this to Postal One, and we'll see if that goes through. I'm not sure if we have enough time left to actually see it, but at least you'll see the initial steps. Okay, so that's done. So now I'm going to go to submit, and so it logs into Postal One, and we'll do finish. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, folks, I'm back. See how we're doing there? It's on 85%. So each one of those steps when it's submitting is, like it's first it opens up a mailing and it's kind of validate that you have a good CRID. I think when it gets to this step here, it's looking at the permit and if you have any nonprofit authorizations and things like that, it's going to check for that kind of thing. This does show, as I mentioned about the mail.dat. Now this mailings only have 2009 records in it. Imagine if you had 60,000 or 100,000 records. This process could take a while, and it can also be slow depending on the volume that Postal One is dealing with. So that's where that second option I mentioned about mail.dat. If you save the mail.dat files, and then you open up this mail.dat upload tool that you get from the Business Customer Gateway. You could be uploading this file outside of Bulk Mailer, and then instead of watching the progress bar, you could jump right back in and start working on your next mailing. So if you're kind of a high production house and you want to make sure that that you've got access to Bulk Mailer all the time, you're going to want to set up that mail.dat screen and start using mail.dat as your upload option. There's some other advantages for mail.dat as well. Sometimes the interface for this submission process here, again called mail.xml, sometimes there's issues that cause it to stop working. Postal One makes some kind of unexpected change or something like that. Having the second option of mail.dat for submitting your mailings is nice, as just having a backup option in case the first one doesn't work. So at this time, any other questions as we're kind of wrapping it up here? Go ahead and post them into the chat window there. And again, like I said, if you've got a subscription to Bulk Mailer, make sure you find your way into that community. If you don't have if you're not sure how to get to it, or you don't have a login for it, You can reach us at supportna, that's for North America, supportna@quadient.com, or you can call us at 357-30, pardon me, 1-800-357-3020. That's 1-800-357-3020. Again, or supportna@quadient.com. Let us know that you'd like access to that community site, and we'll send you out an invitation. You log in once, and then you've got access to all the resources there. For those of you still on the call here, here's the upload application for uploading mail.dat. So you can see while we're still waiting on that one, log in here. Support. This is the test environment version. And to upload it, we go to job validation and upload, add jobs. And we have to sort these by date modified. It looks for both zip files or .hdrs. Today's is the 15th, so this is the one that I just made. So open that guy up. And so we can do validate or upload. We'll do both. And there it's doing the validation. See how we're doing. Bulk mailer, still working on it. This one here, oh, validate failed. Got something wrong in my. So it has a pretty good. Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I went and changed. I think I changed the permit, but I didn't save out the mail.dat files. So I'm not going to be able to get to that screen until bulk mailer's done. So I won't be able to show the two. But since we did get an error, this is handy. If you upload mail.dat and it fails, there's a pretty good error description about what it doesn't like. So you can see it's got an error, a bunch of these. So something about the way it built the CSS container summary file. There's something in the container summary file it doesn't like. So I'll have to do some research on that and see what happened there. If you are using mail.dat and you get to this screen, you've got an error, don't overlook this little button here at export, and then it'll save the entire error log to a file, which is much preferred over just getting a screenshot. Okay, we've got a question. If a record is determined DPV vacant and we send it anyway, will they attempt delivery? Yes, they will attempt delivery. I believe. It may depend on the postal service, on the post office. And in fact, I had one user who said that the post office is pretty quick about marking buildings as vacant, but they're sometimes slow about unmarking them. So yeah, I think they'll still try to deliver it. Is there a way to bring in two address fields but have them address correct into one? So yeah, I mean, if you have 123 main and then address line 2 has street in it, it'll try to combine those together. Basically, it looks in both address fields and tries to figure out if there's an address in there. If there's a lot of non-postal data, then that will sometimes confuse the address correction engine. But one of the things you'll see is, it'll say like, 123 Main Street in address line 1, and then down on address line 2, it says something like attention accounting. After address correction looks at that, it's going to move the non-postal data attention accounting up to address line 1, and it's going to move the 123 Main Street down to address line 2. And the reason for that is so that the address line 2 will sit there right above the city-state zip line. So when it's time to print that address, there's nothing in between the last line with city-state zip and the address line with the street address. The post office doesn't want anything in between there. So if there's non-postal data, it'll get moved up to address line 1. Here's a question. I send new homeowner only. That's a good one. So if you're mailing to just like the current resident or postal patron or something like that at the address, you don't want to run move update, and you don't have to run move update. But you do have to indicate on the mail piece, it's called the alternate address scheme, where you indicate, homeowner or again, postal patron or current resident. As long as you have something like that, you could also have the person's name. If that person moved and it says or current resident, then the postal delivery person will look at it and say, okay, I'm going to go with current resident. So in that case, you do not need to run move update. So it seems like question about 100,000 pieces, and he wants to send 25,000 at a time, 4 separate files. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, the bigger the list, or the larger the list, the more 5-digit trays you're going to have. So and those go at a cheaper price than the ADC or the mixed trays. So that's true. The bigger the list, the cheaper the price. But if you try to break it into 4 separate jobs and enter them as if they were one job, I think that's possible to do with mail.dat, but you cannot do that with bulk mailer. For bulk mailer, it's going to be, if you do them as 4 separate mailings, then you're going to lose the discounting. But what you could do is sort it as a master list, 100,000 pieces as the master list, and then break it up into tray numbers. So take the tray number and copy that to a user text field or a user number field, and then say, okay, the first mailing, we're going to select everything that had tray number 1 through 50, and we're going to make that into a single mailing. And that will keep all those 5-digit trays together. That will keep all the pieces that are eligible to create a 5-digit tray at the cheaper rate together. And then the last mailing will be nothing but the stragglers and the mixed trays. And at the end of the day, when you've done all 4 of those mailings, the amount of postage should be pretty darn close to what you would have gotten if you'd mailed it all as a single mailing. So again, the idea is that you do master sort on it, and then you preserve the tray number that the pieces got identified to into a user number field, and then you create a group where you just select out the first batch of 50 trays, you make that into one mailing, send it out the door. Then a week later, you take 51 through 100, you make that into another mailing, again using groups, so that it's only sorting those pieces that are in those tray ranges. And by doing so, you'll keep that concentration of addresses that qualify for the 5-digit trays together. But in terms of pieces that you're actually mailing, they could all still be just 25,000 pieces in each mailing. Good question. Put that into, if you want more details on that, log into your Quadient account and put in the, post that question into a case, and you get more details on that. Multiple templates for different types of mail pieces. Absolutely. When it comes to mail sorting, you can put in as many, you can create a lot of different templates. Okay, folks, well past the hour, so you all have a good day, and we'll go ahead and close down the session. Thank you for attending, and have a great time. Bye.